Children pose with their parents in 1923, but something strange appears in the corner. Margaret Sullivan's hands trembled as she carefully lifted the dusty photograph from her grandmother's trunk. The afternoon light streaming through her Boston apartment windows illuminated the sepia-toned image, a typical American family from 1923, parents dressed in their Sunday best, three young children arranged formally in front of their modest Chicago home. Her grandmother had passed down countless family photos, but this one had been buried beneath layers of old letters and yellowed documents, wrapped in tissue paper that crackled with age. As an antique appraiser specializing in historical photographs, Margaret had examined thousands of family portraits from the early 20th century. This one seemed unremarkable at first glance. The father wore a crisp three-piece suit and bowler hat, his expression stern, yet kind. The mother stood beside him in a long dark dress with intricate lace collar, her hair carefully styled in the Gibson girl fashion of the era. The children, two boys and a girl ranging from perhaps 6 to 12 years old, stood stiffly with their hands clasped, as was customary for formal photographs when exposure times were still lengthy, but something nagged at Margaret's trained eye as she studied the composition. She reached for her professional magnifying glass and began examining the image more closely. The lighting was adequate for the period's photography technology, the pose traditional, the setting unremarkable. Yet there was something in the background, in the far right corner of the frame, partially obscured by shadows that didn't belong, something that made her breath catch and her heart race with the familiar thrill of discovery. This wasn't just another family photograph, it was hiding a secret that had been overlooked for nearly a century. Margaret adjusted her antique brass desk lamp and positioned the magnifying glass directly over the photograph's right corner, her heart pounding with anticipation. What she saw defied everything she knew about 1920s photography and American family life. There, barely visible in the deep shadows behind the family's wooden porch, was the unmistakable silhouette of a figure, someone who clearly shouldn't have been there, someone who had been deliberately concealed. The figure appeared to be crouching low, partially hidden behind the porch's ornate support beam. Their posture suggested stealth, careful positioning to remain undetected by both the family and the photographer. But what made Margaret's pulse quicken wasn't just the presence of this hidden person, it was what they appeared to be holding in their hands. The object was sleek, metallic, and completely anachronistic for 1923. It possessed clean lines and a modern aesthetic that looked remarkably similar to recording equipment that wouldn't be invented for decades. Margaret had spent 15 years authenticating historical photographs, examining everything from Civil War daguerreotypes to early Hollywood publicity shots. She'd seen her share of photographic anomalies, double exposures, processing errors, damaged negatives, but she'd never encountered anything like this deliberate concealment of modern technology in a vintage image. She grabbed her high-resolution digital camera and took several detailed photographs of the mysterious detail, adjusting lighting and angles to capture every possible nuance. Then she immediately began researching the image's provenance, consulting her grandmother's meticulous notes. According to the faded ink on the photograph's reverse side, the image had been taken by a traveling photographer named Edmund Hartwell in Chicago's bustling Little Italy neighborhood. The family in the portrait were identified as the Morettis, Giuseppe and Maria with their children Antonio, Rosa, and little Salvatore. But who was the figure hiding in the shadows? And what was that impossible object they held so carefully? Margaret knew she was looking at something that could fundamentally rewrite photographic history. Margaret's first step was to thoroughly research the Hartwell photography studio, which, according to city business records, had operated in Chicago from 1920 to 1925. The morning fog rolled off Lake Michigan as she made her way through downtown Chicago to the city archives, her mind racing with questions about what she might discover. Edmund Hartwell had been a respected portrait photographer who primarily served Italian immigrant families throughout the near West Side, establishing his reputation as someone who could capture the dignity and pride of families building new lives in America. His studio had been strategically located on Taylor Street, the bustling commercial heart of Little Italy, where the aroma of fresh bread and simmering tomato sauce filled the air, and conversations flowed between English and rapid Italian. The neighborhood directory from 1923 showed Hartwell's studio positioned between Nonna Moretti's bakery and DeMarco's general store, suggesting he had integrated himself deeply into the community's daily life. At the prestigious Chicago History Museum, Margaret arranged to meet with Dr. James Rodriguez, a distinguished specialist in early 20th century urban photography whose expertise had been featured in several scholarly publications. When she carefully showed him the digitally enhanced images of the mysterious figure, his expression grew increasingly puzzled behind wire-rimmed spectacles. The photographic technology available in 1923 simply couldn't capture details this clearly in heavily shadowed areas, he explained thoughtfully, adjusting his glasses and leaning closer to examine the evidence. The film grain characteristics and exposure limitations of that era would make such precise definition technically impossible. But the mystery deepened significantly when Margaret discovered Edmund Hartwell's original business records, preserved in the museum's climate-controlled archives. According to his leather-bound appointment book, he had photographed the Moretti family on September 15, 1923, but there was a strange cryptic notation written in the margin in faded blue ink. Special Equipment Test, Project Kronos. Below that entry, in noticeably different handwriting that appeared more hurried, someone had written, "Subject unaware. Maintain absolute secrecy." Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward with growing interest, studying the notation carefully. Project Kronos? I've spent decades researching photography projects from the 1920s, and I've never encountered any reference to a program by that name. Margaret felt a distinct chill run down her spine as the implications began to crystallize. This was no longer simply about an unusual photographic anomaly. She was uncovering evidence of a deliberately concealed secret that someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to hide from public knowledge. Margaret understood that her next crucial step had to be locating living descendants of the Moretti family, who might possess additional information or family stories passed down through generations. Through painstaking research using genealogical databases, Chicago city records, and Catholic parish documentation from the era, she successfully tracked down Anthony Moretti Jr., grandson of little Antonio, from the photograph. Now 78 years old with silver hair and kind eyes that reflected decades of hard work, Anthony lived comfortably in an assisted living facility nestled in the tree-lined suburb of Oak Park. When Margaret carefully presented him with the century-old family photograph, Anthony's weathered face immediately lit up with profound recognition and nostalgia. "Madonna mia, that's my nonno Antonio," he said with obvious emotion, pointing with a trembling finger to the young boy in the image. "And there's Nonna Rosa, and Uncle Salvatore, who became a policeman. I heard countless stories about this picture throughout my whole life. It was the pride of our family." But when Margaret gently directed his attention to the mysterious figure lurking in the corner, Anthony's expression dramatically changed from joy to deep confusion and concern. "You know, my father always said there was something peculiar about that photography session," Anthony recalled, his voice growing distant as he accessed long-buried memories. Nonno told him that the photographer had brought some kind of assistant or apprentice who deliberately stayed hidden during the entire session. The family thought it was unusual, perhaps even rude, but they didn't dare question it. They were just grateful immigrants who could barely afford this one professional photograph to send back to relatives in Italy. Anthony slowly retrieved a small, ornate wooden box from his bedroom drawer, handling it with reverence. Inside were carefully preserved letters his grandfather had written in broken but heartfelt English, documenting his challenging early years building a new life in America. One particular letter, dated 1945 and written on faded stationery, immediately caught Margaret's attention. "I still wonder about that strange man hiding behind our house during the picture day. Papa said he was taking pictures of us with some kind of unusual machine we never saw. We never got to see those other pictures he took. The photographer said they were for science, but I always suspected something else was really happening to our family." Margaret realized with growing alarm that she wasn't simply investigating a peculiar photographic anomaly. She was uncovering concrete evidence of a secret experiment that had been conducted on unsuspecting immigrant families without their knowledge or consent. Armed with compelling new leads and Anthony's emotional family testimony, Margaret returned to the extensive Chicago History Museum archives with renewed determination to dig deeper into Edmund Hartwell's mysterious background. What she discovered through hours of meticulous research painted a picture far more complex and intriguing than that of a simple neighborhood portrait photographer serving immigrant families. Hartwell had studied electrical engineering at prestigious Northwestern University, before seemingly abandoning his technical career to open his photography studio. This unusual educational background immediately raised questions about his true motivations and capabilities. Several dusty documents suggested fascinating connections to cutting-edge radio and communication technology research being conducted at major universities throughout the Midwest, placing him at the intersection of art and emerging science. In a neglected file marked Hartwell Estate, 1925, and stored in the museum's basement archives, Margaret made a discovery that literally made her gasp audibly in the silent reading room. The file contained a remarkable collection of detailed technical drawings and extensive correspondence that revealed the true scope of Hartwell's secret activities. The intricate drawings showed comprehensive schematics for what appeared to be an extraordinarily advanced photographic device, sophisticated equipment that could capture multiple exposures simultaneously and record not just visual images, but audio information as well. The technology described in these carefully preserved documents was decades ahead of anything publicly available during the 1920s. One particularly revealing letter, dated October 1923 and written on official university letterhead, was addressed to a Dr. Marcus Webb at the University of Chicago Physics Department. The field test conducted on Taylor Street has been completely successful beyond our initial expectations. The innovative dual exposure system successfully captured both the traditional family portrait and the background surveillance footage without any detection whatsoever. The subject family remained entirely unaware of the secondary documentation process throughout the session. Project Kronos Phase 1 has been completed successfully and all objectives met. Margaret's hands physically shook as she carefully photographed each revealing document with her digital camera. Dr. Webb's detailed reply was equally illuminating and disturbing. Excellent work, Edmund. The government sponsors are extremely pleased with these remarkable results. Your innovative technique for covert documentation while maintaining complete subject comfort will be absolutely invaluable for our ongoing social research programs. Please destroy all physical evidence of the secondary equipment immediately following final testing protocols. Margaret was beginning to understand with growing horror that the innocent Moretti family photograph wasn't simply hiding a mysterious figure. It was concrete evidence of a covert government surveillance program that had deliberately used unsuspecting immigrant families as unwitting test subjects for experimental espionage technology. Margaret's relentless investigation led her to Northwestern University's comprehensive archives, where she desperately hoped to find additional information about the enigmatic Dr. Marcus Webb and his apparent connections to government research. What she discovered in the university's restricted collection was both absolutely fascinating and deeply disturbing, revealing layers of deception that extended far beyond a single photographer's activities. Dr. Webb had been a prominent member of a highly secretive federal research initiative launched in 1922, ostensibly focused on developing advanced surveillance and documentation technologies for national security purposes during the turbulent post-World War I era. The classified program represented unprecedented collaboration between government agencies, academic institutions, and private contractors, all working toward common goals that were deliberately hidden from public scrutiny. The program, officially designated as Project Kronos, had been meticulously designed to test revolutionary new methods of covert observation and recording capabilities on American soil. According to carefully preserved documents that had been declassified during the post-Watergate transparency reforms of the 1970s, the ambitious project involved extensive collaboration between university researchers, carefully selected private photographers, and experienced government intelligence agents to develop sophisticated techniques for documenting American communities without their knowledge or consent. Margaret discovered Webb's personal research notes, which detailed with clinical precision how immigrant neighborhoods had been specifically and deliberately targeted because recent arrivals were statistically less likely to question authority figures or report unusual activities to local law enforcement. The notes revealed a calculating, methodical approach that treated human beings as experimental subjects. Italian families residing on Taylor Street provide ideal test subjects for our research purposes. Recent immigrants from Southern Europe, grateful for any professional services offered, extremely unlikely to investigate anomalies or irregularities in standard portrait photography sessions. The most shocking discovery was a comprehensive technical report describing in detail how Edmund Hartwell had systematically modified standard photography equipment to include a sophisticated secondary recording system, while immigrant families posed proudly for their formal portraits, believing they were participating in a simple commercial transaction. A hidden operator would simultaneously document background activities using experimental surveillance equipment disguised as conventional photography gear. Margaret realized with growing horror that the mysterious figure in the Moretti photograph wasn't simply hiding by accident. They were operating cutting-edge surveillance technology specifically designed to spy on American families, using their desire for family photographs to test intrusive surveillance methods that wouldn't become publicly known for several decades. Determined to identify the mysterious figure captured in the photograph, Margaret began the painstaking process of cross-referencing Project Kronos personnel records with Edmund Hartwell's detailed business documents and correspondence. One name appeared with suspicious frequency across multiple documents: Lieutenant Thomas Crawford, a military intelligence officer who had been temporarily assigned to the civilian research program through an unusual inter-agency cooperation agreement. Crawford's extensive military service record, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request, revealed a distinguished career specifically dedicated to developing innovative surveillance methods for domestic intelligence gathering operations. His expertise included covert operations, experimental technology testing, and what military documents euphemistically referred to as civilian interaction protocols, essentially methods for gathering information from American citizens without their awareness or consent. At the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, Margaret requested Crawford's complete military file, including his operational reports from the period in question. The documents revealed a methodical professional whose entire career had been devoted to perfecting techniques for invisible observation and data collection from civilian populations during peacetime. A significant breakthrough came when Margaret discovered Crawford's own detailed operational reports from September 1923, filed with military precision and clinical detachment. His account of the Moretti family photography session was disturbingly thorough. Subjects remained completely unaware of secondary documentation system throughout entire operation. Standard family portrait session proceeded according to established protocols, while I successfully operated the experimental recording device from carefully concealed position behind residential structure. Advanced technology performed flawlessly during field test, captured clear visual images and audio recordings of family interactions during posed photography session without any detection. But Crawford's report contained an unexpected and crucial revelation that explained everything Margaret had discovered. The sophisticated experimental recording device had experienced a significant malfunction during the session, accidentally capturing Crawford himself within the frame of the official family portrait. Equipment error resulted in unintended operator self-exposure in final photographic image. Photographer Hartwell provided assurance that the anomaly was barely visible to casual observation and would not compromise operational security protocols. Recommended immediate equipment modifications for future field deployments. Margaret realized with astonishment that what she had discovered wasn't simply evidence of systematic government surveillance. It was proof of a rare technological accident that had accidentally documented the very covert program that was designed to remain completely invisible to the American public. Crawford's presence in the photograph was never supposed to be seen by anyone, making it an absolutely unique historical record of secret government activities conducted on American soil. Margaret's investigation into the experimental surveillance equipment led her to Dr. Sarah Chen, a distinguished historian of early 20th century technology at MIT, whose groundbreaking research had been published in numerous academic journals. When Margaret shared Crawford's detailed technical reports and Hartwell's intricate engineering schematics with Dr. Chen, the professor was absolutely astounded by the sophisticated nature of what she was examining. This technology was incredibly advanced for 1923, perhaps even more sophisticated than anything commercially available today in some respects. Dr. Chen explained with obvious excitement, carefully examining the meticulously detailed drawings through a professional magnifying device. They had essentially created a primitive but functional version of what we now call dual-channel recording, capturing both visible light photography and complex sound waves simultaneously through a single integrated system. The precision engineering required for this level of technological integration would have been considered cutting edge, even by 1940s military standards. The comprehensive schematics revealed that Crawford's surveillance device was ingeniously housed within a modified professional camera case, but functioned more like an early prototype of motion picture equipment combined with sophisticated audio recording technology that wouldn't become widely available for decades. The remarkable device could capture up to 5 continuous minutes of both high-quality visual and audio information while remaining completely silent and effectively invisible to casual observation. Dr. Chen's subsequent analysis of the Moretti photograph using state-of-the-art digital enhancement techniques revealed even more startling details that had remained hidden for nearly a century. The metallic object Crawford is carefully holding appears to be a prototype directional microphone array connected through specially designed cables to a compact but powerful recording mechanism, she explained, pointing enthusiastically to enhanced sections of the enlarged image. And if you examine this area closely, you can actually see thin cables running from his concealed position to what appears to be a sophisticated power source hidden beneath the family's front porch. Most remarkably, Dr. Chen's specialized equipment detected faint traces of what appeared to be deliberately etched markings on the photograph itself, microscopic notations that had been methodically added during the development process. Using specialized ultraviolet lighting techniques, they revealed precise coordinates, detailed timestamps, and reference numbers that had been completely invisible to the naked eye for nearly a century. Margaret was looking at concrete evidence of a sophisticated documentation system that had recorded not just visual images, but comprehensive data about surveillance operations systematically conducted on unsuspecting American families throughout the 1920s. Margaret carefully arranged a meeting with Anthony Moretti Jr. at his comfortable assisted living facility to share the full scope of her shocking discoveries. The autumn afternoon sunlight streamed through the facility's large windows as she laid out copies of documents, enhanced photographs, and technical analyses across the communal room table. When she methodically explained the complete scope of what she had uncovered through months of intensive research, Anthony sat in stunned, profound silence for several long minutes. The cherished family photograph that had hung prominently in his grandparents' home for decades, the image that had represented their pride in building a new life in America, was actually concrete evidence that his beloved family had been unwitting subjects in a sophisticated government surveillance experiment designed to test espionage technology on immigrant communities. They were just trying to build an honest life in America, Anthony said quietly, his voice filled with a mixture of sadness and growing anger as he studied the enhanced image of Crawford hiding behind his family's porch. Nono worked 16 grueling hours a day at the steel mill, coming home covered in soot and exhaustion. Nonna took in laundry from wealthy families to help save every penny for this one professional photograph. It was such a luxury for them. And all along, the government was secretly watching them, recording their private conversations, treating them like potential criminals simply because they were immigrants. Margaret showed Anthony the extensive technical documents revealing the true scope of Project Kronos and its systematic targeting of immigrant communities. The secret program had documented hundreds of immigrant families across Chicago, Milwaukee, and Detroit between 1922 and 1925, creating detailed profiles that tracked everything from political discussions around dinner tables to intimate family financial struggles and personal relationships. But there's something else that your family should know, Margaret said, carefully pulling out Crawford's final report from 1925. The program was shut down abruptly in late 1925, and the reason was remarkable. According to these official documents, several immigrant families had begun asking pointed questions about the unusual photography sessions. Some observant families had noticed strange equipment and started talking to neighbors, sharing concerns and suspicions. The government realized the program risked complete exposure. Anthony studied the documents carefully, his expression gradually shifting from sadness to anger to something approaching fierce pride. So our family, our entire community, we figured it out somehow. Even without understanding exactly what was happening, we had the awareness and courage to make them stop their surveillance. Margaret nodded with respect. The Moretti family photograph wasn't just evidence of government overreach and violation of civil liberties. It was powerful proof that immigrant communities possessed the intelligence, awareness, and collective strength to recognize and resist systematic surveillance, even when they didn't fully understand the sophisticated technology being used against them. Family's porch. Nonna worked 16 hours a day at the steel mill. Nonna took in laundry to help pay for this one professional photograph, and all along the government was watching them, recording them, treating them like suspects. Margaret showed Anthony the technical documents revealing the full extent of Project Kronos. The program had documented hundreds of immigrant families across Chicago, Milwaukee, and Detroit between 1922 and 1925. The recordings and surveillance data had been used to create detailed profiles of immigrant communities, tracking everything from political discussions to family financial struggles. But there's something else, Margaret said, pulling out Crawford's final report. The program was shut down abruptly in late 1925. According to these documents, several families had begun asking questions about the photography sessions. Some had noticed unusual equipment and started talking to neighbors. The government realized the program risked exposure. Anthony studied the documents, his expression shifting from sadness to anger to something approaching pride. So our family, our community, we figured it out. We made them stop, Margaret nodded. The Moretti family photograph wasn't just evidence of government overreach. It was proof that immigrant communities had the awareness and strength to resist surveillance, even when they didn't fully understand what was happening to them. Margaret's groundbreaking discovery sparked a comprehensive investigation by civil rights historians, government accountability researchers, and legal scholars who recognized the profound implications of her findings. The Project Kronos files were officially declassified through congressional pressure, revealing the complete extent of systematic surveillance that had been conducted on immigrant communities during the 1920s. The revelation ignited passionate national discussions about privacy rights, government accountability, and the historical treatment of immigrant populations in America. For Anthony Moretti Jr., the discovery brought a profound sense of closure, vindication, and unexpected pride in his family's legacy. My whole life I heard family stories about feeling watched, about not quite trusting that photographer, even though they were grateful for his professional services. My grandmother would tell me about strange feelings during that photography session, about sensing something wasn't quite right. Now I understand completely. Their instincts were absolutely correct, and their awareness helped protect other families. The Moretti family, working closely with civil rights organizations, decided to donate the historically significant photograph to the National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. So where it became the centerpiece of a powerful new exhibit focused on civil liberties and government surveillance throughout American history. The exhibit attracted visitors from around the world who came to understand how surveillance technologies had been systematically tested on vulnerable communities. Margaret collaborated extensively with museum curators to create an innovative interactive display that allowed visitors to examine both the original family portrait and the digitally enhanced version, revealing Crawford's hidden presence. Using state-of-the-art technology, visitors could manipulate lighting and magnification to discover the concealed figure for themselves, experiencing the same shock of recognition that Margaret had felt in her apartment. The exhibit became one of the museum's most popular and impactful attractions, helping Americans understand how surveillance technologies had been developed and tested throughout history, often targeting the most vulnerable members of society. School groups, civil rights advocates, and privacy researchers regularly visited to learn about the intersection of technology, government power, and individual rights. Margaret often visited the museum exhibit, watching with satisfaction as visitors examined the image with magnifying glasses, discovering for themselves the hidden figure that had waited nearly a century to tell his story. The photograph that had seemed like a simple family portrait from 1923 had become something far more significant, a bridge between past and present, revealing how immigrant families had maintained dignity, awareness, and resistance, even under sophisticated covert observation. In the end, the Moretti family photograph proved that no government secret stays buried forever, and that sometimes the most ordinary images hide the most extraordinary truths about American history, civil liberties, and the enduring strength of communities who refuse to be silenced.